In 1993, a comic series entitled The Men in Black, created and written by Lowell Cunningham, was released. It was inspired by the accounts of men in black suits and cars that apparently appear after UFO encounters to suppress information and witnesses. In 1997, a loose film adaptation of the comics was released as Men in Black, which would turn the series into a franchise across multiple films, a cartoon series, crossover comics, and, of course, video games. Though none of these have really got much attention over the years. Are they all just cheap licensed games or underrated gems? Let's put on the last suit you'll ever wear and take a look. It's a video game Odyssey for Men in Black. In an interview in the first issue of The Men in Black, creator and writer Lowell Cunningham says he was inspired by a friend's interest in UFO phenomena and how Men in Black suits would attempt to cover up any sightings. The comic series expands on this by having the Men in Black also deal with supernatural entities such as demons, mutants, mythical creatures, and anything out of the ordinary. Cunningham explains this is because he thought only investigating aliens every issue would become a bit repetitive. The comic had a very dark tone, and the Men in Black were portrayed as a more nefarious and morally ambiguous organisation, who would not hesitate to kill any witnesses of supernatural events, rather than neuralising them or wiping their memory. The relationship between Jay and Kay is also extremely fractured, as the two disagree about almost anything. Anyway, Men in Black released in 1997 in theatres based on the series, albeit very loosely. It still featured Jay, Kay, and Zed as the head of the agency, but the darker tone was replaced with a comedy-oriented approach. The film was a pretty big success for a summer film, and spawned a number of sequels and a fully fledged franchise. This includes our first video game, Men in Black: The Game, released for the PC in 1997 and the PlayStation 1 in 1998. Perhaps the most surprising thing about this game is the genre. It is a survival horror game in the style of Resident Evil. The story is also not based on the film, and revolves around a series of loosely connected missions told through comic-esque cutscenes that I'm not sure quite fit the game, but at least have their own distinct style. The first mission has you playing as Agent J before he joins the Men in Black, chasing a criminal through the New York streets and eventually encountering the Men in Black, which isn't really compatible with the story in the film. The rest of the levels take place in varied settings, including an isolated Arctic research facility, a South American mining town, and a remote island owned by Skip Frails, a computer pioneer who is using alien technology to fuel his success. After each mission, you can wander around the MIB headquarters and choose from a number of weapons to take with you. At the beginning of each mission, you can also choose to play as either Agent J, K, or Agent L, who becomes an agent at the end of the first film. Their likenesses are all scanned in from their movie counterparts and look pretty good for a 1997 game. The choice makes little difference to the gameplay. Apart from different unarmed attacks and the occasional quips muttered by each character, you can choose whoever you want. Being a survival horror game, you will have to manage your resources carefully, and you won't have enough ammunition to defeat all the enemies. Some of the enemies take very little damage from gunfire, and you'll be relying on hand-to-hand combat to defeat them, which mostly involves mashing the attack button and hoping their health empties before yours. The puzzles aren't too bad, although one of the first things the game does is give you a bomb to defuse with no instructions, which may blow you to pieces a few times. There was also a point at the start of the game where I got stuck in a bin for about 5 minutes before I realised you had to punch your way out of it. There's a few instances where the solution to lock doors seems to be to just punch them, but it requires you to be in a very specific place on the screen, which again makes it tricky. However, the worst thing about this game is probably the platforming. Yes, platforming. Can you imagine if Resident Evil had a platforming section? That's what you get here, with you having to jump across platforms over a bottomless pit or across rooftops, which can very easily be fatal with the tank controls the game sticks you with. While the PC and PS1 versions are largely the same, there's a few minor differences. The PC version looks a lot better graphically, due to the limitations of the PS1 hardware, But if you want to play the PC version, I hope you can handle the controls with a keyboard, as there is no controller support for it. Other than that, the only differences are the character portrait appears in the inventory screen in the PC version only. You can save anywhere in the PC version and only checkpoints on the PS1, although they're fairly plentiful, so it's not too much of a concern, and one of the puzzles in the Arctic level has been changed. Other than that, you're getting the same experience regardless of which version you play. Overall, Men in Black the game is unique. It's not what you would expect, being a survival horror, but maybe that's what makes it interesting to play. It is a short game with only 4 levels, and the gameplay and controls make it difficult to play at times, but there is something intriguing about putting the Men in Black into this genre, and if you're not expecting too much, you can definitely check it out. As mentioned, after the success of the film, the franchise expanded to other forms of media, including a cartoon. Men in Black the series ran for 4 seasons and carried on the film's premise in an episodic format, with J and K facing new alien threats. The series is a mixed bag, but overall I think it's pretty good. It brings back lots of the characters from the film and expands their role in episodes where they are the focal point. There is also an overarching plot featuring Alpha, a rogue MIB agent who served as K's mentor, and who, over the course of the series, modifies his body with alien parts and tech to become more and more monstrous. The animation medium is perfect for this series, as it allows for lots of creative alien designs, which would be costly or impossible with practical effects. I think it is definitely worth watching the first season, which is more dark and adult with some of the story, which is lost in seasons 2 to 4, which also changes the appearance of K and Z to make them look younger, and generally involve much more typical stories you would find in cartoons. The animated series, unsurprisingly, also had some tie-in games released based on it, 4 of them in fact. Men in Black the series is a 1999 Game Boy Color platforming game.
What is a Game Boy?
There isn't really much of a plot. You go through the game's 6 levels as Agent K, shooting or jumping on any aliens you see. In fact, the whole game is fairly uninspiring. It falls into the trap of licensed games of the time, which were fairly average cash-ins of films, TV shows and the like. The controls are also a bit clunky, such as the fact that you turn around very slowly, which is a problem when aliens creep up behind you. You can fire your gun forwards and backwards, crouch and shoot, and an upwards attack that fires bullets in an arc pattern, which can make hitting flying enemies a bit tricky, one that doesn't offer much, and the Game Boy Color was capable of much more than what this game offers. A sequel, Men in Black The Series 2, was released for the Game Boy Color again, just a year later in 2000. The game is again a platformer, but the gameplay is a lot different. Your objective is to collect 4 Men in Black sunglasses scattered throughout the level, but these can be collected in any order, so the game is centered more around exploration than linearly progressing through the levels. Although that said, you'll find most of them if you proceed in the direction that the game guides you without too much trouble. Everything about this game feels like an improvement over the first one, although that's not hard. We can play as either J or K, although it makes no difference as to the gameplay. The graphics are better, and there's much more variety to the levels, including bosses at the end of each one. You can also shoot upwards, which is liberating after playing its predecessor. The most annoying mechanic in the game is that you can take fall damage, which in a platformer is an odd thing to implement. It's definitely an improvement over its predecessor, but still nothing overly special. Nevertheless, the different mechanics in each level provide enough variety to make a single playthrough fairly entertaining. Now things are about to get a bit confusing. Another game called Men in Black the series was released on the Game Boy Advance in 2001, made by the same developers who did Men in Black the series and its sequel on the Game Boy Color. Despite having the same name, the Game Boy Advance game is not a port or upgrade of the Game Boy Color game, and is a new game in its own right. The game is similar to Men in Black 2 the series, in the sense that you have to move through the levels collecting items, but this one feels truly non-linear. Each level has a different objective. It can be to destroy aliens using a gun you need to pick up, neuralize human witnesses, or deactivate switches within a time limit. As you move through the levels, You will have to pick up weapons or flip switches that can grant you access to new areas of the level. Annoyingly, the game has no jumping, so you'll have to find other ways of traversing the level, such as rolling over gaps or using elevators. This I found to be the most frustrating part of the game, more so when you factor in the sluggish controls, but not being able to jump does force you to do things a bit differently, which I can appreciate. Overall, it's barely a step up from the other games and is a fairly standard platformer despite its attempts to focus on exploration rather than linear gameplay. Returning to the PlayStation 1, Men in Black the series Crashdown was released in 2001, again being based on the animated series. This time, we get a first-person shooter, going around Manhattan shooting aliens with the classic MIB weaponry and neuralizing any human that witnesses our actions. The game is split into different missions composed of 3 levels each, and each mission feels like it could be an episode of the series. There is a loose story that runs through the missions, with returning characters and enemies, but they can also stand on their own, again, much like the episodes of the series. The characters from the cartoon make an appearance in the cutscenes at the beginning and end of levels, which are well animated for the time and definitely feel like the cartoon, although the voices are noticeably not the same. The game is fairly simple, as there are lots of health pickups throughout, but the last levels do have a sudden difficulty spike, requiring you to complete objectives in a rather strict time limit. A good variety of MIB weaponry, and locations ranging from Chinatown, being shrunk down to the size of an ant in a garden, and even the White House, mean there's plenty of variety to keep things interesting, although the game is guilty of padding itself out a little by having a few levels that are simply going backwards through previous levels, but it's not too much of an issue. It's definitely one of the better games in the franchise, and captures the spirit of the animated series well, although as with most first-person shooter games of this era, it has aged quite a substantial amount, particularly in terms of how the game controls. A year later in 2002, Men in Black 2 was released in theatres, and alongside this, Men in Black 2 Alien Escape on the PlayStation 2 and Nintendo GameCube. Although released alongside the film and sharing its title, the game doesn't follow it at all. The only real reference to the film is the appearance of Jara, one of the villains of the film who appears in about 2 scenes, but even this isn't compatible with the film, as it is implied Jara and Agent J have some history, but this would have happened when Agent K was not still a member of the MIB and living a normal life, which would contradict the fact he is present when you confront him in the game. Anyway, the game itself is a third-person action shooter, which allows you to play as either Agent J or Agent K. Well, apparently, but judging by the character models here, the developers clearly did not have the license to the likeness of Will Smith or Tommy Lee Jones. There are 5 missions in the game, each separated into 3 or 4 levels each, having you blast aliens at the docks, a power plant, the streets of Manhattan, a skyscraper, and an alien spaceship. There's not too much of a story either. Aliens are trying to destroy the Earth, so you'd better destroy them first. Choosing to play as either J or K offers different dialogue through the missions, and while it doesn't impact the story, the two have slightly different guns, but overall the difference isn't significant enough to affect the gameplay. On the subject of the gameplay, it can be summed up very quickly as so: mash the fire button to shoot all the aliens on screen, move forward about 10 meters, and start shooting everything again. There is nothing else to the game. Sometimes you'll have to go find a switch to open a door, and sometimes you'll have to shoot teleporters that will infinitely spawn aliens until they are destroyed. But why do the aliens need these teleporters, since they are seemingly able to spawn in huge numbers every 10 meters or so anyway? The weapon system allows you to collect upgrades throughout the levels to upgrade your guns, so you can do slightly less button mashing, but the game feels completely tedious and devoid of any variety. Even the bosses are handled in the same way, without any real need for strategy. The enemy and level designs are again unremarkable, and while the game works fine without issue, the sheer monotony of the gameplay makes it painful to play, even more so when your hand starts seizing up from mashing that fire button almost constantly. Next, we have quite a rarity. Men in Black 2 Crossfire was released in 2002, only purchasable online through the Wild Tangents game launcher, a very early example of digital-only games purchasable over the internet. Again, like Men in Black 2 Alien Escape, the plot doesn't connect with the film at all. You play as Agent U, who is starting his first day as a Men in Black agent. Unfortunately, this also seems to be the day that aliens decide they want to blow up the Earth, although that seems to be most days in the Men in Black franchise, and you are tasked with hunting down aliens and blasting them into various coloured goo through the game's 10 levels as you attempt to save the Earth and save your partner Agent V, who has typically gone missing at some point. The game is an isometric shooter, having you move through the levels fulfilling objectives, but mostly just shooting aliens. There's a fairly large variety of weapons that the game gives you to play with, a number of bosses, and cutscenes at the beginning and end of levels immerse you in a world that is slightly more expansive than just shooting everything you see. It's a fairly fun game that's not too hard, but the core gameplay is very samey. The one thing I struggled with was the controls. Using the directional keys to move and the mouse to aim often led me to flail around in combat all over the place. But that could just be me not being used to playing with mouse and keyboard. Overall, it feels like a good representation of the Men in Black world, with all the weapons, aliens and dry humour that you would expect, but there's not a lot to the core gameplay. If you want to actually play this game, then this will prove to be quite a challenge, as it was never released outside of the now defunct Wild Tangents games launcher, and it isn't compatible with modern PCs without a fair amount of plugins and tinkering. The final game based on the Men in Black 2 film is Men in Black 2 for mobile phones, released again in 2002. If you're old enough to remember the functionality of mobile phones in 2002, you'll know what to expect in terms of how limited this game is. Nevertheless, this is the only game based on the Men in Black 2 film that actually follows the film in any capacity. The game is a platformer consisting of 4 levels that are based on certain locations in the film. The first level is the subway from the film's opening, the second takes place on the way to the post office, where a neuralized K is living his normal life, the third takes place in MIB headquarters, when it's overrun by the villain Selena, and the fourth is the Manhattan rooftops based on the film's finale. The bosses are also based on creatures in the film, including Jeff, the worm from the subway, Jara, who also appeared in Men in Black 2 Alien Escape, and finally, Selena herself in her final form. The game gives you 3 lives to complete each level, and you can only take 1 hit each life, so there is very little room for error. The enemies don't give you too much trouble once you work at their movement patterns, but the platforming is surprisingly tough in some places, and requires some very precise jumping. In the third level, there's a section which requires you to jump over radioactive barrels, avoid a rolling silver ball of death, and also shoot oncoming enemies at the same time, which took me a fair amount of attempts to finally do. The last level also has deadly air vents that kill you if you touch them, requiring some very precise jumping to get over. I imagine this platforming would have been even worse if you were playing on an old mobile phone keypad. The bosses themselves are fairly easy, and don't even attack you. You just have to make sure you don't touch them when they move, and once you know their pattern, they are trivial. The only one which may present a problem is the second boss, which again requires some precise jumping to jump over them while they move across the screen. Overall, there's not too much to this early mobile game, but you certainly have to appreciate it actually tying into the film and giving a challenge with regards to the platforming. Continuing with mobile games, Men in Black Alien Assault and Men in Black Without a Trace were released in 2007. These two are essentially the same game. The only difference is that Alien Assault was made for older phones in 2007, while Without a Trace was for newer ones, so the latter has slightly better performance and graphics. The game is a top-down shooter, which has you shooting your way through various levels, completing various missions that you can accept at MIB headquarters. The game has you play as Agent J. No, not Agent J, Agent J. Completely different people, as you investigate alien activity and put a stop to a vaguely described alien scheme about cloning the Earth or something. It's somewhat entertaining for a mobile game, but there's not much to it. You just shoot aliens and push blocks around to navigate the levels. It's also a fairly easy and quick game to play and complete, but mobile games back in 2007 were rarely substantial in any way, so that's somewhat expected. One of the big problems is that Agent J seems to be the slowest walker in the world, making levels a pain to traverse. Again, it's worth picking up the Without a Trace version, as the better performance means you move slightly faster, but only slightly. In short, it's a simple, somewhat fun game, that doesn't add to the franchise in any way, but perfectly playable for the time and the format. Returning back to the film adaptations, we have Men in Black 3, released in conjunction with the film for mobile phones in 2012. The game actually follows the film this time, with you playing as Agent J, tracking down the escaped criminal Boris, and travelling to 1969 to prevent him from killing a young Agent K. It's a platforming game that has you mostly shooting anything that moves, but there's also some variety in the levels to keep it interesting. Although the game does follow the movie in a broad sense, it does change a few minor things. For example, we have Jeeves, a character from Men in Black 1 and 2, who doesn't appear at all in Men in Black 3. Shows up from time to time to give you items. And by give, I mean you shoot his regenerating head off, as is customary in the films. Also, we get Agent F, or Frank the Pug, accompanying Jay back in time, and he's even playable in a few sections, where he attacks by... yeah. Anyway, this is honestly a pretty fun little platformer and shooter, and while it's limited by being a mobile game designed for older phones in 2012 that you can run through in about an hour, it's still pretty good fun and captures the feel of the film as well as it could. Also released alongside the third film in 2012, we have Men in Black Alien Crisis for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 and Nintendo Wii. All the versions are the same apart from some slight graphical limitations on the Wii. The game is a standalone accompaniment to the film, but does feature some minor characters such as Agent O, the new head of MIB, and Frank, or Agent F again. The main story itself has you play as Peter Delacour, a thief for hire who steals an ancient book that turns out to be an ancient alien artifact. The Men in Black capture Peter and enlist his cooperation, having you chase down the book and ultimately saving the world from annihilation. The gameplay itself is an on-rails shooter, which has you moving through levels automatically while shooting everything in your way. It quickly becomes apparent that there isn't much to this game, you're just constantly shooting wave after wave of the same 3 types of enemies. The game attempts some variety, with some in-car combat scenes, stealth sections that are just a case of shooting waves of cameras instead, and some point-and-click style sections which have you scanning items and talking to people to accomplish a task. But these feel like very minor additions that serve very little purpose in an attempt to add variety just for the sake of it. You will probably get the most out of the game playing with the Wii version, since you can aim and shoot using the motion controls, rather than just a controller in the other versions. The game does have the foundations of what could be a much more impressive game. The voice acting is fairly good, getting in talent like Troy Baker, who plays Joel in The Last of Us, to voice Peter, and also getting the voice of Frank the Pug in the films to reprise his role in the game too. The story has a competent structure, but falls into very typical tropes that don't flesh out the more interesting elements. It feels like the game was just developed up to a certain point early in its development, and just hastily finished and released. But by far the most annoying thing in the game is the constant quips that Peter makes throughout, and will have you constantly groaning.
You know, for an advanced space traveling race, I was expecting a bit more security.
Die! Die! Die!
God, you sound like my mom!
Overall, Men in Black Alien Crisis is a lackluster title that has very little going for it. Outside of being a Men in Black tie-in, it's an on-rails shooter that gives you very little to do, other than shoot waves upon waves of the same aliens with no replayability, and very forced variety that contributes nothing to the experience. It's a shame that the only relatively recent console release in this franchise is so poor. Returning back to mobile phones, there was another game entitled Men in Black 3, also released in 2012, but this was released free to play for newer phones on Android rather than the Java game for older phones we looked at previously. This one is a completely different experience, as it combines a simulation and management element where you have to manage the MIB agency by building new rooms to expand the agency and train agents. The story only follows Men in Black 3 in the sense that you can travel between the different areas of New York City in the present day or 1969, when Men in Black 3 is partially set. Other than that, the story is completely different. An alien in a red suit named Radiant, leader of an alien cult known as the Embers, is after a powerful source of energy known as a vagrant star, and intends to destroy the Earth to get it. The story feels very typical of a Men in Black story. Alien is looking for a miniature energy source and threatens to destroy the Earth to get it. You know the score. The turn-based battles aren't too interesting from a gameplay perspective. but you can get some help from characters from the films, such as Agent K, to aid you in battle. Being a free-to-play mobile game, a huge element of it revolves around grinding out resources to upgrade the agency and your equipment, and if you're not willing to pay, then this can take a very long time, as there's a lot to upgrade. Progress through the story is slow, as the combination of upgrades and having to wait for your energy to refill if you do too many actions, again, if you're not paying, means that you might get bored long before you complete the story. There's plenty of cameos from familiar characters from the franchise, which is nice, but a lot of the missions just involve you building gadgets and rooms in the agency, or tapping to collect things in the different locations. It's pretty typical of mobile games of its time, but if you're a fan of Men in Black, and you're happy just to do a few things a day without having to spend actual money, this might be the game to choose above all the very similar ones. Like a lot of mobile games from this time, however, the game is no longer officially available due to the license expiring and being removed from app stores. Another mobile game, and the only one on this list I haven't actually played, is Men in Black Global Invasion, released alongside Men in Black International. It's a GPS-based game in which you move around the world fighting and capturing aliens to collect them all. If this sounds like Pokemon Go, but with aliens, then you'd be right. That's essentially what this game is. In this game's defense, it is not the first game to take the highly successful Pokemon Go game and slap another franchise on top, with Ghostbusters, Jurassic Park and The Walking Dead just some of the others guilty of this. The battle system in Global Invasion is a bit more complex and involved than Pokemon Go, which isn't difficult to be fair, as you build your alien team and use MIB weapons to defeat other aliens in campaign battles and PvP. Like many free-to-play mobile games, there's only so much you can do per day without paying to win, but it's not a game you'll be playing for long stretches per day anyway. The variety of aliens, from what I can tell, is not that great, especially not compared to hundreds of different Pokemon, and it does little else to separate it from that which it is imitating. Unfortunately, or perhaps not, the game was pulled from app stores and the servers went offline around a year after the game was released, with no warning or explanation given by the developers. We can perhaps assume that the license expired, or the Pokemon Go developers weren't too happy with this imitation. Either way, this is one you probably won't be playing anytime soon, and you're probably not missing out on much in doing so. In 2019, the same year as Global Invasion and Men in Black International, yet another mobile game, Men in Black Galaxy Defenders, was released. This one is an on-rails shooter that has you visiting the various locations of Men in Black International and just shooting lots and lots of aliens. There's not much of a story outside of shooting through these hordes of aliens and taking down the occasional boss. Missions usually last no more than a minute or two, so it's ideal for playing on your phone when you have a few minutes. You can fight other players in PvP and compete in PvE events for a top score, but at its core it's just a case of pointing and shooting. As you might expect in a free-to-play mobile game again, there's lots of upgrades you can buy using in-game currency or real money, such as weapons and new agents with different abilities, which again look nothing like their film counterparts. But all of these don't really enhance the game or give you that much of an edge. On top of the constant in-game ads, the game consistently feels like a grind fest without purpose and full of interruptions. On the positive side, the different areas look pretty good, and it is fun to get a quick win, but other than that, it is a very typical free-to-play game, with the Men in Black franchise painted on top. So there we have it, that's every Men in Black game ever released. Overall, while I think there are some decent games in the series, I don't think any of them really expand beyond being more than an average licensed or tie-in game. I think if I were to pick the best one, it would probably be Men in Black the series Crashdown, as it captures the feel of the cartoon in its story fairly well, although I did enjoy the older Men in Black free mobile game, as it's a fun little platformer that captures the main points of the film pretty well. The first Men in Black game gets a shout out too, for its strange genre choice in being a survival horror. I would love to see a good Men in Black game, but with the future of the franchise uncertain after the poor performance of Men in Black International, it's uncertain where the franchise goes from here. Interestingly, the rights for the original comic series are now in the hands of Marvel, so who knows what they would do if they were to reimagine the series, but none of that matters anyway, as there are no such thing as aliens, extraterrestrials have never made contact with or visited this planet, and there is certainly no such thing as the Men in Black. Thanks for checking out this video game Odyssey for Men in Black. If you want to see full playthroughs for any of the games featured in this video, you can check out the archives on my Twitch channel, and you can support the channel by subscribing here, on Patreon, and on Twitch. Just check the video's description. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you for the next Video Game Odyssey.